The United States House of Representatives is one of the two houses of the United States Congress. It is frequently referred to as the House. The other house is the Senate. The composition and powers of the House are established in Article I of the United States Constitution. The major power of the House is to pass federal legislation that affects the entire country, although its bills must also be passed by the Senate and further agreed to by the U.S. President before becoming law. The House has some exclusive powers, the power to initiate revenue bills, to impeach officials, and to elect the U.S. President in case there is no majority in the Electoral College. Each U.S. state is represented in the House in proportion to its population as measured in the census, but every state is entitled to at least one representative. The most populous state, California, currently has 53 representatives. On the other end of the spectrum, there are 7 states with only one representative each. The total number of voting representatives is fixed by law at 435. Each representative serves for a 2-year term. The Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, who presides over the chamber, is elected by the members of the House, and is therefore traditionally the leader of the House Democratic Caucus or the House Republican Conference, whichever party has more voting members. The House meets in the south wing of the United States Capitol. History. Under the Articles of Confederation, Congress was a unicameral body in which each state held only one vote. After 8 years of a more limited federal government under the Articles, numerous political leaders, such as James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, initiated the Constitutional Convention in 1787, which received the Confederation Congress's permission to amend the Articles of Confederation. All states except Rhode Island agreed to send delegates. The issue of how Congress was to be structured was one of the most divisive among the founders during the convention. Edmund Randolph's Virginia plan called for a bicameral Congress. The lower house would be of the people, elected directly by the people of the United States and representing public opinion, and a more deliberative upper house that would represent the individual states, and would be less susceptible to variations of mass sentiment, would be elected by the lower house. The House is referred to as the lower house, with the Senate being the upper house, although the United States Constitution does not use that terminology. Both houses' approval is necessary for the passage of legislation. The Virginia plan drew the support of delegates from large states such as Virginia, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania, as it called for representation based on population. The smaller states, however, favored the New Jersey plan, which called for a unicameral Congress with equal representation for the states. Eventually, the convention reached the Connecticut Compromise, or the Great Compromise, under which one house of Congress would provide representation proportional to each state's population, whereas the other would provide equal representation amongst the states. The Constitution was ratified by the requisite number of states in 1788, but its implementation was set for March 4, 1789. The House began work on April 1, 1789, when it achieved a quorum for the first time. During the first half of the 19th century, the House was frequently in conflict with the Senate over regionally divisive issues, including slavery. The North was much more populous than the South, and therefore dominated the House of Representatives. However, the North held no such advantage in the Senate, where the equal representation of states prevailed. Regional conflict was most pronounced over the issue of slavery. One example of a provision repeatedly supported by the House but blocked by the Senate was the Wilmot Proviso, which sought to ban slavery in the land gained during the Mexican-American War. Conflict over slavery and other issues persisted until the Civil War, which began soon after several Southern states attempted to secede from the Union. The war culminated in the South's defeat and in the abolition of slavery. Because all Southern senators except Andrew Johnson resigned their seats at the beginning of the war, the Senate did not have the balance of power between North and South during the war. The years of Reconstruction that followed witnessed large majorities for the Republican Party, which many Americans associated with the Union's victory in the Civil War and the ending of slavery. The Reconstruction period ended in about 1877. The ensuing era, known as the Gilded Age, was marked by sharp political divisions in the electorate. The Democratic and the Republican Party held majorities in the House at various times. The late 19th and early 20th centuries also saw a dramatic increase in the power of the Speaker of the House. The rise of the Speaker's influence began in the 1890s, during tenure of Republican Thomas Brackett Reed. Czar Reed, as he was nicknamed, attempted to put into effect his view that the best system is to have one party govern and the other party watch. The leadership structure of the House also developed during approximately the same period, with the positions of Majority Leader and Minority Leader being created in 1899. While the Minority Leader was the head of the minority party, the Majority Leader remained subordinate to the Speaker. The speakership reached its zenith during the term of Republican Joseph Gurney Cannon, 1903 to 1911. The powers of the Speaker included chairmanship of the influential Rules Committee and the ability to appoint members of other House committees. These powers, however, were curtailed in the Revolution of 1910, because of the efforts of Democrats and dissatisfied Republicans who opposed Cannon's arguably heavy-handed tactics. The Democratic Party dominated the House of Representatives during the administration of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, often winning over two-thirds of the seats. Both Democrats and Republicans were in power at various times during the next decade. The Democratic Party maintained control of the House from 1955 until 1995. In the mid-1970s, there were major reforms of the House, strengthening the power of subcommittees at the expense of committee chairs and allowing party leaders to nominate committee chairs. These actions were taken to undermine the seniority system, and to reduce the ability of a small number of senior members to obstruct legislation they did not favor. There was also a shift from the 1970s to greater control of the legislative program by the majority party. The power of party leaders grew considerably. The Republicans took control of the House in 1995, under the leadership of Speaker Newt Gingrich. Gingrich attempted to pass a major legislative program, the Contract with America, on which the House Republicans had been elected, and made major reforms of the House, notably reducing the tenure of committee chairs to 3 two-year terms. Many elements of the contract did not pass Congress, were vetoed by President Bill Clinton, or were substantially altered in negotiations with Clinton. The Republicans held on to the House until 2007, when the Democrats won control and Nancy Pelosi was subsequently elected by the House as the first female Speaker. The Republicans retook the House in 2011, the largest shift of power since the 1930s. Membership, Qualifications and Apportionment. Under Article I, Section 2 of the Constitution, seats in the House of Representatives are apportioned among the states by population, as determined by the census conducted every 10 years. Each state, however, is entitled to at least one representative. The only constitutional rule relating to the size of the House states, the number of representatives shall not exceed one for every 30,000. Congress regularly increased the size of the House to account for population growth until it fixed the number of voting House members at 435 in 1911. The number was temporarily increased to 437 in 1959 upon the admission of Alaska and Hawaii, and returned to 435 4 years later, after the reapportionment consequently to the 1960 census. The Constitution does not provide for the representation of the District of Columbia or of territories. The District of Columbia and the Territories of American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands are represented by one non-voting delegate each. Puerto Rico elects a resident commissioner, but other than having a 4-year term, the resident commissioner's role is identical to the delegates from the other territories. The 5 delegates and resident commissioner may participate in debates. Prior to 2011, they were also allowed to vote in committees and the Committee of the Whole when their votes would not be decisive. Redistricting. States that are entitled to more than one representative are divided into single-member districts. This has been a federal statutory requirement since 1967. Prior to that law, general ticket representation was used by some states. States typically redraw district boundaries after each census, though they may do so at other times, such as the 2003 Texas redistricting. Each state determines its own district boundaries either through legislation or through non-partisan panels. Malapportionment is unconstitutional and districts must be approximately equal in population. Federal courts have allowed state legislatures to redistrict as they please, allowing various forms of gerrymandering as long as the district is contiguous and of appropriate population size, but Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits redistricting plans that are intended to, or have the effect of, discriminating against racial or language minority voters. Qualifications, Article I, Section 2 of the Constitution sets 3 qualifications for representatives. Each representative must be at least 25 years old, have been a citizen of the United States for the past 7 years, and be an inhabitant of the state they represent. Members are not required to live in the district they represent, but they traditionally do. The age and citizenship qualifications for representatives are less than those for senators. The constitutional requirements of Article I, Section 2 for election to Congress are the maximum requirements that can be imposed on a candidate. Therefore, Article I, Section 5, which permits each house to be the judge of the qualifications of its own members, does not permit either house to establish additional qualifications. Likewise, a state could not establish additional qualifications. Disqualification, under the 14th Amendment, a federal or state officer who takes the requisite oath to support the Constitution, but later engages in rebellion or aids the enemies of the United States, is disqualified from becoming a representative. This post-Civil War provision was intended to prevent those who sided with the Confederacy from serving. However, disqualified individuals may serve if they gain the consent of 2/3 of both houses of Congress. Elections for representatives are held in every even-numbered year, on Election Day, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. By law, representatives must be elected from single-member districts by plurality voting. After a census is taken, the year ending in 2 is the first year in which elections for U.S. House districts are based on that census. In most states, major party candidates for each district are nominated in partisan primary elections, typically held in spring to late summer. In some states, the Republican and Democratic parties choose their respective candidates for each district in their political conventions in spring or early summer, which often use unanimous voice votes to reflect either confidence in the incumbent or the result of bargaining in earlier private discussions. Exceptions can result in so-called floor fight convention votes by delegates, with outcomes that can be hard to predict. Especially if a convention is closely divided, a losing candidate may contend further by meeting the conditions for a primary election. The courts generally do not consider ballot access rules for independent and third-party candidates to be additional qualifications for holding office, and there are no federal regulations regarding ballot access. As a result, the process to gain ballot access varies greatly from state to state, and, in the case of a third party, may be affected by results of previous year's elections. In 1967, federal law was changed to require that representatives be elected from single-member districts, due to fear that, as a consequence of the recent Wesbury v. Sanders decision, courts would impose at-large plurality districts on states that did not redistrict to comply with the new mandates for districts roughly equal in population, and also to prevent attempts by southern states to use such voting systems to dilute the vote of racial minorities. Louisiana is unique in that it holds an all-party primary election on the general election day with a subsequent runoff election between the top 2 finishers if no candidate received a majority in the primary. The states of Washington and California now use a similar system to that used by Louisiana. Seats vacated during a term are filled through special elections, unless the vacancy occurs closer to the next general election date than a pre-established deadline. The term of a member chosen in a special election usually begins the next day, or as soon as the results are certified. Terms: representatives and delegates serve for 2-year terms, while the resident commissioner serves for 4 years. The Constitution permits the House to expel a member with a 2/3 vote. In the history of the United States, only 5 members have been expelled from the House. In 1861, 3 were removed for supporting the Confederate States secession: John Bullock Clark, John William Reed, and Henry Cornelius Burnett. Michael Myers was expelled after his criminal conviction for accepting bribes in 1980, and James Tficant was expelled in 2002 following his conviction for corruption. The House also has the power to formally censure or reprimand its members. Censure or reprimand of a member requires only a simple majority, and does not remove that member from office. Comparison to the Senate, as a check on the regional, popular, and rapidly changing politics of the House, the Senate has several distinct powers. For example, the advice and consent powers are a sole Senate privilege. The House, however, has the exclusive power to initiate bills for raising revenue, to impeach officials, and to choose the president in the event of an Electoral College deadlock. The Senate and House are further differentiated by term lengths and the number of districts represented. The Senate has longer terms of 6 years, fewer members, and larger constituencies per member. The Senate is informally referred to as the upper house, and the House of Representatives as the lower house. Salary and benefits. Salaries. As of January 2010, the annual salary of each representative is $174,000. The Speaker of the House and the majority and minority leaders earn more, $223,500 for the Speaker and $193,400 for their party leaders. A cost of living adjustment increase takes effect annually unless Congress votes to not accept it. Congress sets members' salaries. However, the 27th Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits a change in salary from taking effect until after the next election of the whole House. Representatives are eligible for retirement benefits after serving for 5 years. Outside pay is limited to 15% of congressional pay, and certain types of income involving a fiduciary responsibility or personal endorsement are prohibited. Titles. Representatives use the prefix "the Honorable" before their names. A member of the House is referred to as a representative, congressman, or congresswoman. While senators are technically congressmen/congresswomen, the two terms are generally used exclusively by members of the House of Representatives. Pension. All members of Congress are automatically enrolled in the Federal Employees Retirement System, a pension system for civil servants. They become eligible to receive benefits after 5 years of service. The FERS is composed of 3 elements: Social Security, the FERS Basic Annuity, a monthly pension plan based on the number of years of service and the average of the 3 highest years of basic pay, the Thrift Savings Plan, a 401k-like retirement account into which participants can deposit up to a maximum of $17,000 in 2012. Their employing agency matches employee contributions up to 5% of pay. Members of Congress may retire with full benefits at age 62 after 5 years of service, at age 50 after 20 years of service, and at any age after 25 years of service. They may retire with reduced benefits at ages 55 to 59 after 5 years of service, and age 50 after 20 years of service. Depending on birth year, they may receive a reduced pension after 10 years of service if they are between 55 years and 57 years of age. Tax deductions. Members of Congress are permitted to deduct up to $3,000 of living expenses per year incurred while living away from their district or home state. Health and life insurance. Members of Congress are eligible to participate in the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program and the Federal Employees Life Insurance Program. Personnel, mail and office expenses. House members are eligible for a member's representational allowance to support them in their official and representational duties to their district. The MRA is calculated based on 3 components, one for personnel, one for official office expenses and one for official or franked mail. The personnel allowance is the same for all members. The office and mail allowances vary based on the member's district's distance from Washington, D.C., the cost of office space in the member's district, and the number of non-business addresses in their district. These 3 components are used to calculate a single MRA which can be used to fund any expense. Even though each component is calculated individually, the franking allowance can be used to pay for personnel expenses if the member so chooses. In 2011 this allowance averaged $1.4 million per member. and ranged from $1.35 to $1.67 million. The personal allowance was $944,671 per member in 2010. Each member may employ no more than 18 permanent employees. Members' employees' salary is capped at $168,411 as of 2009. Travel allowance: each member and one staffer can be paid for one round trip between their home and their congressional district and Washington, D.C. For organization caucuses. Officers, member officials: the party with a majority of seats in the House is known as the Majority Party. The next largest party is the Minority Party. The Speaker, committee chairs, and some other officials are generally from the Majority Party. They have counterparts in the Minority Party. The Constitution provides that the House may choose its own Speaker. Although not explicitly required by the Constitution, every Speaker has been a member of the House. The Constitution does not specify the duties and powers of the Speaker, which are instead regulated by the rules and customs of the House. Speakers have a role both as a leader of the House and the leader of their party. Under the Presidential Succession Act, the Speaker is second in the line of presidential succession behind the Vice President. The Speaker is the presiding officer of the House but does not preside over every debate. Instead, he or she delegates the responsibility of presiding to other members in most cases. The presiding officer sits in a chair in the front of the House chamber. The powers of the presiding officer are extensive. One important power is that of controlling the order in which members of the House speak. No member may make a speech or a motion unless he or she has first been recognized by the presiding officer. Moreover, the presiding officer may rule on a point of order. The decision is subject to appeal to the whole House. Speakers serve as chairs of their party's steering committee, which is responsible for assigning party members to other House committees. The Speaker chooses the chairs of standing committees, appoints most of the members of the Rules Committee, appoints all members of conference committees, and determines which committees consider bills. Each party elects a floor leader, who is known as the Majority Leader or Minority Leader. The Minority Leader heads his or her party in the House, and the Majority Leader is his or her party's second highest ranking official, behind the Speaker. Party leaders decide what legislation members of their party should either support or oppose. Each party also elects a whip, who works to ensure that the party's members vote as the party leadership desires. The current majority whip in the House of Representatives is Kevin McCarthy, who is a member of the Republican Party. The current minority whip is Steny Hoyer, who is a member of the Democratic Party. The whip is supported by chief deputy whips. In the 112th Congress, the Democratic Party has an additional assistant minority leader, Jim Clyburn, who ranks between the whips and the caucus conference chair. After the whips, the next ranking official in the House party's leadership is the party conference chair. After the conference chair, there are differences between each party's subsequent leadership ranks. After the Democratic caucus chair is the campaign committee chair, then the co-chairs of the steering committee. For the Republicans it is the chair of the House Republican Policy Committee, followed by the campaign committee chairman. The chairs of House committees, particularly influential standing committees such as Appropriations, Ways and Means, and Rules, are powerful but not officially part of House leadership hierarchy. Until the post of Majority Leader was created, the chair of Ways and Means was the de facto Majority Leader. Leadership and partisanship: representatives are generally less independent of party leaders than senators, and usually vote as the leadership directs. Incentives to cooperate include the leadership's power to select committee chairs, determine committee assignments, and provide re-election support in the primary and general elections. As a result, the leadership plays a much greater role in the House than in the Senate, an example of why the atmosphere of the House is regarded by many as more partisan. When the presidency and Senate are controlled by a different party from the one controlling the House, the Speaker can become the de facto leader of the opposition. Some notable examples include Tip O'Neill in the 1980s, Newt Gingrich in the 1990s, and John Boehner in the 2010s. Since the Speaker is a partisan officer with substantial power to control the business of the House, the position is often used for partisan advantage. In the instance when the presidency and both houses of Congress are controlled by one party, the Speaker normally takes a low profile and defers to the President. For that situation, the House Minority Leader can play the role of a de facto leader of the opposition, often more so than the Senate Minority Leader, due to the more partisan nature of the House and the greater role of leadership. Non-member officials. The House is also served by several officials who are not members. The House's chief officer is the clerk, who maintains public records, prepares documents, and oversees junior officials, including pages. The clerk also presides over the House at the beginning of each new Congress pending the election of a Speaker. Another officer is the Chief Administrative Officer, responsible for the day-to-day administrative support to the House of Representatives. This includes everything from payroll to food service. The position of Chief Administrative Officer was created by the 104th Congress following the 1994 midterm elections, replacing the positions of doorkeeper and Director of Non-Legislative and Financial Services. The CAO also assumed some of the responsibilities of the House Information Services, which previously had been controlled directly by the Committee on House Administration, then headed by Representative Charlie Rose of North Carolina, along with the House Folding Room. The chaplain leads the House in prayer at the opening of the day. There is also a Sergeant-at-Arms, who as the House's chief law enforcement officer maintains order and security on House premises. Finally, routine police work is handled by the United States Capitol Police, which is supervised by the Capitol Police Board, a body to which the Sergeant-at-Arms belongs. Procedure. Daily procedures. Like the Senate, the House of Representatives meets in the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. At one end of the chamber of the House is a rostrum from which the Speaker, Speaker pro tempore, or the Chair presides. The lower tier of the rostrum is used by clerks and other officials. Member seats are arranged in the chamber in a semicircular pattern and are divided by a wide central aisle. By tradition, Democrats sit on the right of the center aisle, while Republicans sit on the left, as viewed from the presiding officer's chair. Sittings are normally held on weekdays. Meetings on Saturdays and Sundays are rare. Sittings of the House are generally open to the public. Visitors must obtain a House gallery pass from a congressional office. Sittings are broadcast live on television and streamed online by C-SPAN. The procedure of the House depends not only on the rules, but also on a variety of customs, precedents, and traditions. In many cases, the House waives some of his stricter rules by unanimous consent. A member may block a unanimous consent agreement. In practice, objections are rare. The presiding officer enforces the rules of the House, and may warn members who deviate from them. The presiding officer uses a gavel to maintain order. The box in which legislation is placed to be considered by the House is called the hopper. In one of its first resolutions, the U.S. House of Representatives established the office of the Sergeant-at-Arms. In an American tradition adopted from English custom in 1789 by the first Speaker of the House, Frederick Muhlenberg of Pennsylvania, the House of Representatives mace is used to open all sessions of the House. It is also used during the inaugural ceremonies for all presidents of the United States. For daily sessions of the House, the Sergeant-at-Arms carries the mace in front of the Speaker in procession to the rostrum. It is placed on a green marble pedestal to the Speaker's right. When the House is in committee, the mace is moved to a pedestal next to the desk of the Sergeant-at-Arms. The Constitution provides that a majority of the House constitutes a quorum to do business. Under the rules and customs of the House, a quorum is always assumed present unless a quorum call explicitly demonstrates otherwise. House rules prevent a member from making a point of order that a quorum is not present unless a question is being voted upon. The presiding officer will not accept a point of order of no quorum during general debate or when a question is not before the House. During debates, a member may speak only if called upon by the presiding officer. The presiding officer decides which members to recognize, and can therefore control the course of debate. All speeches must be addressed to the presiding officer, using the words Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker. only the presiding officer may be directly addressed in speeches. Other members must be referred to in the third person. In most cases, members do not refer to each other by name, but by state, using forms such as the gentleman from Virginia, the distinguished gentlewoman from California, or my distinguished friend from Alabama. Unlike the practice in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, members refer to each other as friends regardless of whether they are members of the same party. There are 448 permanent seats on the House floor and 4 tables, 2 on each side. These tables are occupied by members of the committee that have brought a bill to the floor for consideration and by the respective party leadership. Members address the House from microphones at any table or the area immediately in front of the rostrum. Passage of legislation. Per the Constitution, the House determines the rules according to which it passes legislation. The rules are in principle open to change with each new Congress, but in practice each new session amends a standing set of rules built up over the history of the body in an early resolution published for public inspection. Before legislation reaches the floor of the House, the Rules Committee normally passes a rule to govern debate on that measure. For instance, the committee determines if amendments to the bill are permitted. An open rule permits all germane amendments, but a closed rule restricts or even prohibits amendment. Debate on the bill is generally restricted to 1 hour, equally divided between the majority and minority parties. Each side is led during the debate by a floor manager, who allocates debate time to members who wish to speak. On contentious matters, many members may wish to speak. Thus, a member may receive as little as 1 minute, or even 30 seconds, to make his/her point. When debate concludes, the motion in question is put to a vote. In many cases, the House votes by voice vote. The presiding officer puts the question, and members respond either yea or nay. The presiding officer then announces the result of the voice vote. A member may however challenge the presiding officer's assessment and request the yeas and nays, or request a recorded vote. The request may be granted only if it is seconded by 1/5 of the members present. In practice, however, members of Congress second requests for recorded votes as a matter of courtesy. Some votes are always recorded, such as those on the annual budget. A recorded vote may be taken in one of 3 different ways. One is electronically. Members use a personal identification card to record their votes at 46 voting stations in the chamber. Votes are usually held in this way. A second mode of recorded vote is by teller. Members hand in colored cards to indicate their votes, green for yea, red for nay, and orange for present. Teller votes are normally held only when electronic voting breaks down. Finally, the House may conduct a roll call vote. The clerk reads the list of members of the House, each of whom announces their vote when their name is called. This procedure is only used rarely because of the time consumed by calling over 400 names. Voting traditionally lasts for 15 minutes, but it may be extended if the leadership needs to whip more members into alignment. The 2003 vote on the prescription drug benefit was open for 3 hours, from 3:00 to 6 a.m., to receive 4 additional votes, 3 of which were necessary to pass the legislation. The 2005 vote on the Central American Free Trade Agreement was open for 1 hour, from 11 p.m. to midnight. An October 2005 vote on facilitating refinery construction was kept open for 40 minutes. Presiding officers may vote like other members. They may not, however, vote twice in the event of a tie. Rather, a tie vote defeats the motion. Committees. The House uses committees and their subcommittees for a variety of purposes, including the review of bills and the oversight of the executive branch. The appointment of committee members is formally made by the whole House, but the choice of members is actually made by the political parties. Generally, each party honors the preferences of individual members, giving priority on the basis of seniority. Historically, membership on committees has been in rough proportion to the party's strength in the House as a whole, with 2 exceptions. On the Rules Committee, the majority party fills 9 of the 13 seats. And on the Ethics Committee, each party has an equal number of seats. However, When party control in the House is closely divided, extra seats on committees are sometimes allocated to the majority party. In the 109th Congress, for example, the Republicans controlled about 53% of the House as a whole, but had 54% of the Appropriations Committee members, 55% of the members on the Energy and Commerce Committee, 58% of the members on the Judiciary Committee, and 69% of the members on the Rules Committee. The largest committee of the House is the Committee of the Whole, which, as its name suggests, consists of all members of the House. The committee meets in the House chamber. It may consider and amend bills, but may not grant them final passage. Generally, the debate procedures of the Committee of the Whole are more flexible than those of the House itself. One advantage of the Committee of the Whole is its ability to include otherwise non-voting members of Congress. Most committee work is performed by 20 standing committees, each of which has jurisdiction over a specific set of issues, such as agriculture or foreign affairs. Each standing committee considers, amends, and reports bills that fall under its jurisdiction. Committees have extensive powers with regard to bills. They may block legislation from reaching the floor of the House. Standing committees also oversee the departments and agencies of the executive branch. In discharging their duties, standing committees have the power to hold hearings and to subpoena witnesses and evidence. The House also has one permanent committee that is not a standing committee, the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and from time to time may establish committees that are temporary and advisory in nature, such as the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming. This latter committee, created in the 110th Congress and reauthorized for the 111th, has no jurisdiction over legislation and must be chartered anew at the start of every Congress. The House also appoints members to serve on joint committees, which include members of the Senate and House. Some joint committees oversee independent government bodies. For instance, the Joint Committee on the Library oversees the Library of Congress. Other joint committees serve to make advisory reports. For example, there exists a Joint Committee on Taxation. Bills and nominees are not referred to joint committees. Hence, the power of joint committees is considerably lower than those of standing committees. Each House committee and subcommittee is led by a chairman. From 1910 to the 1970s, committee chairs were powerful. Woodrow Wilson in his classic study, suggested, "Power is nowhere concentrated. It is rather deliberately and of set policy scattered amongst many small chiefs. It is divided up, as it were, into 47 seigneuries, in each of which a standing committee is the court baron and its chairman Lord Proprietor. These petty barons, some of them not a little powerful, but none of them within the reach of the full powers of rule, may at will exercise almost despotic sway within their own shires, and may sometimes threaten to convulse even the realm itself." From 1910 to 1975 committee and subcommittee chairmanship was determined purely by seniority. Congress members sometimes had to wait 30 years to get one, but their chairship was independent of party leadership. The rules were changed in 1975 to permit party caucuses to elect chairs, shifting power upward to the party leaders. In 1995, Republicans under Newt Gingrich set a limit of 3 two-year terms for committee chairs. The chair's powers are extensive. They control the committee-subcommittee agenda, and may prevent the committee from dealing with a bill. The senior member of the minority party is known as the ranking member. In some committees like Appropriations, partisan disputes are few. Legislative functions, most bills may be introduced in either House of Congress. However, the Constitution provides that all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. As a result of the origination clause, the Senate cannot initiate bills imposing taxes. This provision barring the Senate from introducing revenue bills is based on the practice of the British Parliament, in which only the House of Commons may originate such measures. Furthermore, congressional tradition holds that the House of Representatives originates appropriation bills. Although it cannot originate revenue bills, the Senate retains the power to amend or reject them. Woodrow Wilson wrote the following about appropriations bills. The constitutional prerogative of the House has been held to apply to all the general appropriations bills, and the Senate's right to amend these has been allowed the widest possible scope. The upper house may add to them what it pleases, may go altogether outside of their original provisions and tack to them entirely new features of legislation, altering not only the amounts but even the objects of expenditure, and making out of the materials sent them by the popular chamber measures of an almost totally new character. The approval of the Senate and the House of Representatives is required for a bill to become law. Both houses must pass the same version of the bill. If there are differences, they may be resolved by a conference committee, which includes members of both bodies. For the stages through which bills pass in the Senate, see Act of Congress. The President may veto a bill passed by the House and Senate. If he does, the bill does not become law unless a two-thirds supermajority in each chamber votes to override the veto. Checks and balances. The Constitution provides that the Senate's advice and consent is necessary for the President to make appointments and to ratify treaties. Thus, with its potential to frustrate presidential appointments, the Senate is more powerful than the House. The Constitution empowers the House of Representatives to impeach federal officials for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, and empowers the Senate to try such impeachments. The House may approve articles of impeachment by a simple majority vote. However, a two-thirds vote is required for conviction in the Senate. A convicted official is automatically removed from office. In addition, the Senate may stipulate that the defendant be banned from holding future office. No further punishment is permitted during the impeachment proceedings. However, the party may face criminal penalties in a normal court of law. In the history of the United States, the House of Representatives has impeached 16 officials, of whom 7 were convicted. Only 2 presidents of the United States have ever been impeached, Andrew Johnson in 1868 and Bill Clinton in 1998. Both trials ended in acquittal. In Johnson's case, the Senate fell 1 vote short of the two-thirds majority required for conviction. Under the 12th Amendment, the House has the power to elect the President if no presidential candidate receives a majority of votes in the Electoral College. The 12th Amendment requires the House to choose from the 3 candidates with the highest numbers of electoral votes. The Constitution provides that the votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. Electoral College deadlocks are rare. In the history of the United States, the House has only had to break a deadlock twice. In 1800, it elected Thomas Jefferson over Aaron Burr. In 1824, it elected John Quincy Adams over Andrew Jackson and William H. Crawford. The Senate elects the Vice President if the Electoral College deadlocks. Latest election results and current party standings. Current standing, end of previous Congress, see also. There are also individual houses of representatives for most states in the U.S., sometimes called by a different name. See List of United States state legislatures. Bibliography of U.S. Congressional Memoirs, Self-Executing Rule, Standing Rules of the United States House of Representatives, Suspension of the Rules in the United States Congress, United States Presidents and Control of Congress, Women in the United States House of Representatives, Membership Lists, House Trade Working Group, List of freshman class members of the 113th United States Congress, List of current members of the United States House of Representatives by age and generation, 113th Congress. The 113th United States Congress will run from January 3, 2013 to January 3, 2015. Proposed bills of the 113th United States Congress, Acts of the 113th United States Congress, References. Surveys. Notes. External links. United States House of Representatives, Clerk of the House of Representatives, Chief Administrative Office of the House, Office of the Majority Leader, Office of the Speaker of the House, Kids in the House Educational Site, Official List of Current Members, Rules of the House. Legislative Information and Archives for U.S. House and Senate, via Thomas, Biographical Directory of the United States Congress, 1774 to present, A New Nation Votes, American election returns 1787 Euro 1825, complete downloadable list of U.S. representative contact information, via Ag Data LLC, United States House of Representatives collected news and commentary at The Washington Post.